Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. I first want to thank you all for making the time to join us for today's webinar. My name is Natalie Taylor, and I'm a content marketing writer here at Feedvisor. I'm joined by Alex Sklar, Amazon financing expert and head of business development at Payability. Alex, want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Natalie. As Natalie just said, I'm the head of business development for Payability, a technology company offering financing and payment solutions to e-commerce businesses. I've been in financial technology for the past 7 years. I have about 10 years of finance and accounting experience on top of that, and founded a couple of companies myself. So excited to be here.
We're excited to have you here. I do just quickly want to mention that we will be sending out a link to today's recording and presentation, and there will be time for Q&A at the end. So if you have questions throughout, we encourage you to enter them into the space, and we'll try our best to get to all of them. So from product sourcing, fulfillment and logistics, advertising, customer service, selling on Amazon requires extensive bandwidth. Having the proper cash flow is pivotal to the scalability of your business. In 2019, catalog expansion was the top business goal of the year for Amazon sellers, with nearly 2/3 cited expanding their existing product line as their #1 objective, followed by diversifying to other marketplaces at 35% and launching new private label brands at 32%. So whether it's expanding your catalog, diversifying markets, or hiring more staff, cash flow is crucial to achieving your business goals and growth. Without it, you run the risk of not being safeguarded from unexpected occurrences that are inevitable on the Amazon landscape. And these could be inventory policy changes, negotiating pricing deals from your vendors, or maybe a lack of resources to properly invest in your Amazon business's growth. And cash flow comes in two forms: negative cash flow, which means that more cash flow is going out of the business than coming in, and positive cash flow, which means that more cash is coming in than going out. So of course, ongoing positive cash flow is necessary for you to succeed on Amazon. But even enterprise businesses are confronted with cash flow gaps and negative cash flow, both of which can result from various triggers like payment terms or not aligning your inventory position with real-time product demand. And the time between when you purchase inventory to when you get paid from Amazon for the sale can sometimes take weeks. And when your funds are tied up, you won't have enough cash flow to buy new inventory, which can result in decreased sales velocity and snowball into bigger issues. So today we'll be further outlining the importance of cash flow to your Amazon business, as well as strategies to better manage your existing cash flow and prevent financial gaps, ways you can benefit from having predictable cash flow, and tools and tips you can implement to generate more cash flow to support your expansion in the year ahead. So on that note, Alex, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Natalie. And I think first we want to start out with just a quick poll and ask, what channels are you investing the most in? And you can choose from marketplaces, your own website, wholesale, or brick and mortar. And we'll just give everyone a couple seconds to be able to select make their selections. Oh, it's very interesting. So it looks like 50% said that they're looking to invest most in marketplaces, 36% on their own website, 7% in wholesale, and about 7% in brick and mortar retail, which kind of aligns itself with what we typically see with our own customers as well. So let's get into it. So first, I'd like to begin with a disclaimer of sorts. Everything you're going to hear will be based on my own firsthand knowledge, as well as doing some independent research and my experience over the years. There are thousands of different financial institutions out there, and all of them are different. I don't claim to be an expert on everything financial, and would always suggest you do your own homework on any financing decision. But my goal through this webinar is to kind of talk to you about some different options when we're talking about cash flow. So when we're looking at the financing landscape, businesses of all sizes are often overwhelmed when trying to discover all the financing options out there. Whether we're doing our own research through blogs, looking at lenders' websites, talking to colleagues and trade associations, or talking to friends, the information never seems to be readily available, concise, or informative. We often work off of the anecdotes we hear from others, and we tend to hear terms like we see on the screen right now: term loans, SBA, USDA loans. Why don't you take a line of credit on your house like a HELOC, 504 loans, unsecured working capital, secured working capital, and it can often be rather daunting. It's important to remember when looking at options that a lot of options are tailored for specific purposes. Let's look at buying equipment like a forklift is very different from buying inventory. When we're buying equipment, we're looking to have that equipment for years and have it for our own use. When we're buying inventory, our goal is to have it for a short amount of time and ideally sell it. Thus, the point of that example is to kind of show that different financing situations serve different purposes. When we're talking about cash flows specifically, there are different options, some tailored for cash flow and some tailored for e-commerce, and then some that don't really take that into consideration. We'll get into some of those options in a couple slides later, but I want everyone to kind of just see some of the terms that they have out there, and we're gonna focus on fintech a little because that's what we do, but really we're gonna focus on cash flow. So on the next slide, let's discuss what the importance of cash flow is. So as we take a look at the screen here, I wonder if any of these thought bubbles look or sound familiar to you. I'll give you a quick second to look them over and read them. But these are the real pain points as business owners that we face daily when we operate our business. Cash flow is literally the lifeblood of business. Not having consistent cash flow or having cash flow tied up can have several risks, whether it's not being able to make timely payments to your vendors or suppliers, not being able to cover payroll on payday, stocking out during a holiday rush or other peak season, losing the buy box if you're selling on Amazon because you're out of stock, or missing out on opportunities to grow your business, whether they're in new product verticals, discounted deals on more inventory, or new types of marketing. Not having cash flow on hand can make an already hard task of running your business even harder. On the next slide, we're going to kind of go into some of the positives, of having cash flow. So knowing the pain points of not having cash flow, they're real, and we typically feel them as business owners all the time, some of the ones we just mentioned before. But some of the opportunities, first we'll talk about smoothing your cash flow. So smoothing your cash flow is, kind of what it sounds. It's instead of having high peaks and valleys of cash flow coming in and cash flow going out, it's having a repeatable stream of cash flow. So, the cash flow in the business looks a lot smoother and it is more predictable. Smoothing your cash flow allows you to not feel as much strain in your everyday activities when operating your business, because you have cash on hand to, do all the things that, tend to show up in the expense lines of your P&L. Available cash flow also allows you to sell on your own terms and not have to plan your business around when you'll be paid. Different marketplaces, different vendors, different opportunities we have that, essentially are our customers on one level or another that are paying us. When they're paying us in different terms, it starts to kind of fragment our cash flow. Whether you're being paid on 14 terms from Amazon, or you're being paid on net 30 terms from, one of your other customers, typically marketplaces and large customers pay on terms. And, a lot of times what happens is we have to wait to be paid before we can actually move on to other opportunities and purchase inventory and things like that. So being able to utilize tools to control your cash flow and make it more predictable allows you to take on projects at a better time frame rather than having to wait to get paid before you can take a project on. Cash flow also allows you to buy and turn more inventory. By having access to daily cash flow, you can purchase on a faster cadence, allowing you to scale your company faster and reach new growth. We'll take a look at some real life examples of that in some of our case studies. But the idea here is if we're waiting once a month or twice a month to receive our proceeds for making sales, to then be able to use that money to purchase more inventory, the amount of inventory purchases we can make in a year is decreased. It might be once a month, twice a month, maybe even once a quarter. And that may make sense for some businesses that are just maybe purchasing huge amounts of inventory a couple times a year. But for those of us in e-commerce that are, selling maybe on multiple marketplaces, maybe also selling on our own website, a lot of times we see different types of, seasonal opportunities. Q4, which we're in right now, being one of them, where we're selling things that are really starting to move, whether they're trending or whether it's just because it's seasonal. But we want to constantly be able to purchase more inventory if we have something that's really moving off the shelves. And having access to daily cash flow allows you to take that money and immediately reinvest it back into your business. And then finally, I think when we're talking about importance of cash flow, it's about capitalizing on opportunities. Having access to cash flow allows you to take on new opportunities because you don't have to wait a month or 3 weeks to be able to make a decision to capitalize on something. You'll have the cash on hand to be able to take on the opportunities and not have a larger opportunity cost of missing out. On the next slide, we're going to get into some of our options. So we've talked about the pain points of cash flow. We're talking about some of the benefits of cash flow, but what are some of the options we're looking at? So when we're talking about options, usually we want to start by asking ourselves just a couple quick questions. How fast do I need the funds? What's my time frame to pay it back? What are the rates? And is this an ongoing cash flow infusion, or am I taking out like a large loan or something like that that I'm going to plan for on my own? So on the screen, we can see here, we have a couple different options. And this chart is tailored specifically to e-commerce businesses. So we've broken it out into a couple rows: fast approval, flexibility, e-commerce friendly, and limited financials. So when we're talking about bank loans on the left-hand column, we're talking about traditional bank loans. Now, traditional bank loans can usually be some of the largest dollar amounts, and they can also have some of the lowest APRs. But when we're talking about them for e-commerce businesses and marketplace sellers, there are some negatives that we want to think about. One is the approval time. So when we talk about rates in general, and whether it's a factor rate, whether it's an APR, whether it's an interest rate, what we really are concerned about is what's the overall cost of financing. After all the interest or any fees that are charged, what is the actual amount compared to the amount of proceeds I had? Because then what we want to think about too is, what am I going to do with that money and what will that multiple be? If you were going to, let's say, take a loan to invest into marketing, and you know that you have a 4x ROAS, return on advertising spend, for your marketing, then taking $10,000, in theory, if you were to borrow $10,000 and you could turn that into $40,000, you would want to look at what the actual financing cost is against, how much you're going to be able to utilize the funds for. So, and that's a slightly different conversation, but I think it's really important when we're looking at what our options are to kind of understand how it all plays together. So back to the traditional bank loans on the left. They're not known to have fast approvals. Bank loans can usually take anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months to secure. They're not flexible in that you usually are stating what the purpose of the loan is for, as well as how you're going to use the proceeds. They don't tend to be too e-commerce friendly. If you have a local community bank in your area, sometimes they're willing to work with you if you're a certain size. If you're a very small business, a lot of times it's not always applicable. And a lot of times what we see with traditional banks is they're still not totally certain how e-commerce works. Some of them think it's still kind of a fad, that it'll kind of go out of won't be that popular going forward. So these are the types of challenges we often have to have when we're talking to traditional banks. The other negative about a traditional bank is that they have limited financials. They require financials, and you can't do it with limited financials. So when we're talking about the financials to a bank, it's going to be, probably your last 12-month bank statements, your last 2 to 3 years of tax returns, both for the business and your personal tax returns. They're going to want to see financials for the last 2 or 3 years. That's going to be a balance sheet. It's going to be a P&L statement, possibly a cash flow statement if you have it. They may also want to have a list of who your top customers are. They'll want to have some references, and that's just for the business. Then they're going to underwrite you individually. They're going to want to look at a credit score. They're going to want to know if you own a home and all these different things, because what they're doing by having the rates as low as they do, they need to be assured of the risk. So all that time goes into underwriting, because banks are loaning you other people's money that's on deposits or in savings. So that amount of pressure for them to make sure they don't have defaults means that the time frame in which they work is much, much longer. When we're talking about lines of credit and traditional lines of credit from banks, again, they have about the same approval process. They usually also want you to have an account with the bank and have a depository account. They are flexible though. Once you have the line of credit, most lines of credit are designed for working capital. So you're able to draw down from the account and pay back into it. They can be e-commerce friendly in that if you're approved, once you're approved for the line of credit, you can use the money however you see fit. It's getting approved that's the hard part. When we talk about financials again, it's going to be very similar to the bank loan, where they're going to be looking at the full financials I just named before. When we talk about financial technology, companies like our company Payability, as well as other companies out there, one of the things that we can do through technology is have very fast approvals. Our company has a 15-minute underwriting, and we approve people in less than 24 hours. Similar companies to ours also provide fast approvals, because that was kind of why they were built, one of the main reasons that they were built. Flexibility with fintech companies is that there are different companies out there for different situations that tailor themselves to be able to work with all sorts of different types of situations, which leads into the fact that they're e-commerce friendly. Most fintech companies don't have many branches around the country, and they don't have large buildings, so they're able to take similar resources that a traditional bank would put into brick and mortar locations, and they put it into the technology to be able to move faster and run faster. Additionally, with fintech firms, you're often not asked for the same type of financials. With our company as an example, we don't require any credit checks or bank statements. We hook in via API to whatever marketplace you're selling on, or website builder like Shopify. Similar products to ours also work via APIs and are pulling in information to make their risk and credit scores that are different than having to send in bank statements or financials. When we're talking about traditional factoring, which is often a great source for cash flow for large enterprises or brick and mortar, typically it's not a fast approval. It can be anywhere from as fast as usually 5 days to as long as 3 weeks, but there's a lot of back and forth involved of paperwork, sending in invoices, your own financials, because the factoring companies, they're underwriting two companies, really. They're underwriting you, who's going to have access to the cash flow, but then they have to also underwrite all the companies whose invoices you're factoring. They tend not to be that flexible in that they may not actually provide cash flow solutions for all your customers. They may only pick and choose which invoices they'll factor. They tend not to be e-commerce friendly. They want to, feel secure that they're working with larger brick and mortar type businesses. And when we're talking about limited financials, they usually want a full financial package, similar to what we were talking about in traditional bank loans. Lastly, we have credit cards. A lot of people use credit cards, and they can be really quick, easy solutions if you're managing the debt correctly. Credit cards typically have a faster approval process. Once you have the credit card, they're very flexible in that you can spend the money however you want as long as credit cards are accepted. They tend to be very e-commerce friendly for companies that are buying their goods online from different stores or from like Alibaba or places like that. And they usually require limited financials. Typically, the credit cards are underwriting you as the business owner separately from the business, even if it's a business credit card. The main issue with credit cards is just the limit. Typically, credit cards, depending on your size of your business, sometimes they cap out at 50,000, sometimes 100,000, but credit cards also have revolving debt. So it's not necessarily like in some of the fintech situations or the traditional factoring situations where you're getting your own money at a discount. Credit cards it's a debt product. So if you kept a balance on a credit card, it'll have revolving interest and can add up if it's not used properly. On the next slide, we want to do another quick poll question and ask, what are some of your roadblocks to growth? So the answers are cash flow, bandwidth, product market fit, and competition. I'll give you a couple seconds to answer that. Interesting. So it looks like 60% said that the biggest roadblock to growth is cash flow, which I think is why you're attending this webinar and why I'm on it talking to you. Some of the others were competition, which I think exists outside e-commerce in general. Competition exists across all industries. I'm surprised to not see any on bandwidth. That's actually great. That means that everyone has enough time to be running their businesses. And then we had 10% on product market fit, which can often be a hard nut to crack. On the next slide, so now it's time to kind of talk about tips for managing existing cash flow. So let's say cash flow is coming in, people are paying you on time, which is great and doesn't always happen, but it's beautiful when it does. And then we want to, kind of see some tips for managing the existing cash flow that you have. So we'll start by talking about accounting software. So there's all sorts of different accounting software out there. Probably one of the biggest that people use is QuickBooks. And tools like QuickBooks allow us to manage our business and finances and our accounting quickly and easily. A lot of times when businesses start, we start with like an Excel sheet or something similar, and we're just kind of doing the quick and dirty, getting some numbers up there. But different types of accounting software like QuickBooks and FreshBooks and Xero, even some of the smaller ones like Wave, a lot of them have e-commerce in mind now and are even building all sorts of great different types of applications and integrations into different software. There's even solutions out there like a partner of ours, ConnectBooks, which is essentially an accounting software 100% exclusively focused on accounting solutions for Amazon sellers. So I would recommend that, if you're not using accounting software, you should definitely look into it. Some of the bigger brands like QuickBooks by Intuit has these great APIs and integrations already with software you might already be using. So it might be worth doing a little digging, a little, Googling around to search for that. And if you're not using accounting software, I would definitely suggest doing some research into it. I'm not here to promote any actual brand or company, just kind of giving you some of the examples that I use, but I would definitely look around, because even if you, as a business owner, if you can just save 5 minutes or 10 minutes in a simple task, at the end of the day, that time starts to really add up and become more effective for you. Next are banking solutions. Different types of mobile apps allow you to turn on notifications when money has been deposited to your account. as well as when money has left your account to pay different expenses. There's low balance notifications, and really all sorts of these different types of, they're called trigger events because they kind of want to trigger you into an action. And there's all sorts of banking software out there and apps that you can connect with your accounting software or with different apps, so you can have a faster, clearer picture of your money. And similar to the accounting software, a lot of really interesting banking software that banks are even providing this for free now in some ways to your accounts, allow you to really like map out where your money's being spent. Sometimes we have a budget and we have it in our accounting software and we think we know what we're spending on. And then sometimes to look at the actual cash in and cash out through like, whether it's a chart or like a heat map or something similar, understanding what you're actually spending the money on versus what you think you're spending the money on is always really helpful. And you'd be amazed, with some of these different tools that just kind of track your subscription spending. When you take a look and you see, essentially analyze subscriptions that you've had for the last year, and then see if you're actually using them or not. At the end of the day, some of these subscriptions can get costly, and if you're not actually utilizing them, it might be a good way to free up a little additional cash flow. Another one is FX solutions, which is here we're talking about Forex or foreign exchange. Companies like OFX, TransferWise, Topalti, and others, provide a better solution for paying overseas and paying your suppliers and vendors overseas. Instead of worrying about international wire fees or currency fluctuations, you can count on experts to handle those transactions for you. They also play a really big role if you're selling into a market outside of your home country. For example, if you're living in the US and you're selling on Amazon Canada, it's probably the best to set up an account to manage these global currencies. That way, you're not worrying about transferring a Canadian dollar back to a US dollar, or similar if you're selling on some of the new emerging marketplaces in Latin America or Asia. You want to be able to send dollars in their local currency. You also want to receive dollars back in your currency. But really, you want to have professionals managing the buy and the sell of those dollars. Because what's happening in the background is there's, an exchange of, similar to the way the stock market works, but it's for currencies. And they're buying and selling currencies. So being able to leverage a large company that's doing that at scale can often give you greater discounts, as well as allow you, if you're selling a large amount overseas, it allows you to leverage forward contracts so you can buy currency at a cheaper rate and then have that cheaper rate going forward over, several months. The next one is inventory management. And there's a lot of great inventory management software out there. And I would definitely recommend exploring some of the different software out there. It allows you to stay up to date on what products are low on inventory and what products are not performing well. A solid inventory management software will allow you to stay up to date with your product catalog, so you never miss out on an opportunity either. One of the worst things that can happen is you have something, it's doing great, and you actually stock out of it, and someone else was kind of looking at what you were doing and maybe copying it and like selling the same item. And now they're able to sell it and you've kind of missed out because you're stocked out. Great inventory management does a great job at letting you know the different times when you should be reinvesting into your inventory. The last one is analytics tools. The power of data will allow you to make better buying decisions. Products like Feedvisor, which is an AI-driven platform and a team of Amazon strategists, they help you analyze your catalog and your competitive landscape and your category share. They also allow you, we were just talking about inventory management. They allow you to analyze your inventory levels to help you monitor your business performance, avoid cash flow gaps, and develop a customized strategy to achieve your business goals. When we look at all these things, it all comes back to data. So, whether we're talking about accounting software and it's your financial data, banking solutions and it's your cash data, foreign exchange, inventory management, they're all analytic tools. So, tools like Feedvisor allow you to kind of capture all of that in one place and then be able to make better decisions. Because that's what it really comes down to, is being able to make better decisions. On the next slide, we're going to discuss a little bit about how you benefit. So we've kind of touched a couple of these areas already. But I think, in the picture, we're kind of saying it because they all really, they kind of play into each other. Paying bills, on time, buying inventory, reinvesting are really the wheels that kind of turn our business and allow us to grow. So one of the biggest benefits of having, predictable cash flow, whether it's as much cash flow as you want, a lot of times we always wish it could be more, but the reality is just knowing and when you're going to be paid and being able to predict that allows you to start to create budgets. Am I going to purchase this different type of software? Am I going to do this different type of marketing? Does it make sense for me to do it now? Does it make sense for me to do it in 3 weeks? When we don't know when we're going to get paid, or we're getting paid, in too far, or if our cash conversion cycle is too long, meaning we're getting paid every month, we're getting paid twice a month. It doesn't always allow us to budget as well, because sometimes we want to be able to act fast as business owners and be able to take other opportunities. Regardless of when you're getting paid, knowing the cadence of being paid is one of the most important things, because then we can set our budgets. And, for companies that don't have budgets, I would definitely recommend start that budget now. We're in a perfect time. You can take a look at what you've been doing this last year and start budgeting and have a great budget ready for 2020. I would also kind of recommend, if you've never put a business plan together before, and that leads into another point about planning for the future. Business plans are probably one of the best ways to plan for the future. Whether you're using it to take a loan, whether you're using it to bring on investors, or whether you're just using it for yourself, just putting down into a formal business plan what your competitive advantages are, what you think the opportunity looks like, how you're going to take those opportunities, what is the competitive market look like, who are your competitors, what are the different tools you can use, where do you see the company going in 3 months, 9 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, and 5 years. Being able to lay that out, as well as laying out who's going to accomplish this. You might put this all on paper and then realize, I don't have enough people to get it done. Maybe I need small bite-sized pieces. But really just being able to put it down on paper and kind of show yourself where you think you're going over the next couple of years, and then being able to hold yourself accountable to it, it's tremendously helpful. Understanding and having readily available cash flow makes that, similar, like we were talking about budgeting, it makes it a little easier. Being able to reinvest in the business can also show you how you're going to grow, so you can plan in time for it, which goes hand in hand with forecasting. We want to be able to forecast what we think next month is going to look like. If we don't really understand how we're getting paid, and we don't have access to different types of cash flow tools or daily cash flow to have money in the business, it's really hard to plan. What are we going to do next month? What are we going to do 2 months from now? And finally, we wanted to go over just a couple case studies. So this study was done by Marketplace Pulse, and it was how access to your cash flow can increase your seller ranking. So, as it says, in studying the performance of sellers with and without payability, it was clear that daily access to cash flow can improve Amazon sellers and grow their product catalogs. A major part of this was the sellers that had access to daily cash flow were not stocking out, and they were also having more on-time deliveries. Our seller ranking comes from our customers. They're going to come on there, and as we all know in e-commerce, people are very quick to jump online and start typing something if they've had a negative experience. A lot of times, we see this across all of e-commerce. People are usually a little faster to voice their negative experience more than their positive experience. So, in a lot of ways, if something works exactly the way it's supposed to work, people just kind of go on with their lives. If something doesn't work the way they were expecting, that's when they get angry and they start to hop online and hit the keyboard. Stocking out when someone wants something, when they want to buy something from you and they're really excited about it, and they purchase and they go to purchase it and they don't receive it, or they receive it late. They're so excited about having it, not having it fast leads to them, being upset, and they take those grievances online. Having healthy cash flow and having good stock and not stocking out, so anytime someone wants something from you, they're able to buy it, and the deliveries are happening on time because it's all readily available. That leads to them either not making a review, which doesn't hurt you, or writing a positive review. I got the exact product I was looking for and I got it exactly on time. And that's what this study really broke down with a lot of data from our business. The next case study, here we have two side by side. The one on the right is one of our great customers, Gina Goldring. She buys wholesale from distributors in the New York area. Because of her close proximity to these sources of inventory, Gina is able to constantly reinvest in her inventory that's moving well. Because she always has capital on hand, she doesn't need terms from her supplier, and they're super happy to supply her with their products in a short time frame. So after she received, so she was a customer with us who was using our daily cash flow product, and you can see it on the left, and it started to grow. And then, as she was growing her business, she actually took an advance from us, and that allowed her to grow her business 50% because she was basically able to buy a larger portion of inventory in one shot. On the left-hand side, we have Sean and Lisa, who grew their family business, Jump City Toys, exponentially with just having access to daily cash flow. As you can see in the beginning, there were many, many months before we had met where they were just kind of doing the same amount of numbers. Every now and then they would have a peak sale, but for the most part, they were just kind of steadily growing. And, every day they were doing some numbers, but they weren't able to get that really big pop that they were looking for. Once we started working with them and started providing them daily cash flow for their Amazon sales, they were able to take that money, reinvest it immediately back into buying inventory, grow their product catalog, and just scale their business exponentially. And that's it for the case studies.
All right, thank you, Alex. So just to quickly summarize, taking proper measures to avoid cash flow challenges and having steady positive cash flow can help you transform negative cash flow into incremental profits and drive long-term growth. And as you're mapping your strategy for 2020, it's important to also keep in mind the bigger picture megatrends at play in the consumer landscape, as well as the specific retail subtrends that have stemmed from these larger forces at hand. So to get an understanding of what these key e-commerce megatrends look like, the implications that they have for your business, and how you can adapt your strategy to ensure your business grows alongside them, you can download a free copy of our ebook at the link provided here. Now, we would like to get into some questions as part of the Q&A, and we also have a brief poll that you should see on your screen now. As always, if you'd like to learn more about any of the ongoing initiatives we have here at Feedvisor, please connect with us. All right, now let's get into some questions. So Alex, first question we have for you. How do you think about the ROI of taking financing?
So I think it's a great question. And I think each company is different and should think about their own unique situations. But when I'm looking at, ROI, return on investment for e-commerce and marketplace sellers, I think we need to think about opportunity costs. So unlike a traditional brick and mortar retailer, I'm in New York, so I always use a pizzeria as an example. So like a pizzeria, they can't necessarily take funds and invest them into things that will immediately drive revenue. At the same time, they have a physical presence. So people walk by their store, they smell the pizza, maybe they don't walk in today, but they kind of come back to it. But there's that physical presence that they can see it. When we're talking about e-commerce businesses, you don't really exist online unless you're telling people you exist. And that comes in the form of, typically marketing or having placements on marketplaces in different areas. So whether it's pay-per-click campaigns, whether it's, email campaigns or other types of marketing, you don't have that same presence that the brick and mortar store has, where you can't find you unless you've already done something to kind of bring them in. So when we're talking about e-commerce businesses, you're always starting by having to make an initial investment. Also, when we're talking about the ROI on it, e-commerce businesses can actually see immediate returns on their investments. Kind of what we were talking about before in the example of the ROAS on marketing. But also whether it's not stocking out of inventory while an item's trending, running out of stock during like a holiday season, losing the buybacks in the case of Amazon, spending money on ad placements that immediately return value. It's also interesting to remember that e-commerce businesses can actually be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So being able to put money into the business to be able to grow the business, I think, the ROI on taking financing in e-commerce is exponentially greater than for a traditional brick and mortar company.
What are the biggest risks to be considered when looking at financing?
I think one of the biggest risks when we're, is not understanding what you're signing yourself up for. I think oftentimes people don't read through contracts or understand what they're actually signing up for. While, there's tons of great companies and lenders out there, there are also ones that don't always have our best intentions in mind. So some of that can be lenders who finance you more than you can afford. Some of them are ones who want to rush you through things. So I think when we're talking about some of the risks, I think the risks are making a decision before you know the decision that you're making. And I think that everybody should always, read agreements, ask questions in general. Like if someone's not willing to give you an answer, it could be that they don't know, and that happens. But, if someone's not willing to give you an answer, I would take a pause and I would think about that. I mean, it's a big decision. I think the reason I work in the industry is I think it's helpful for tons and tons of companies. But I think one of the risks are don't jump into it blind, understand what you're doing. And then also understand that when you're looking at financing, it's to grow your business. It's not that you got a raise, you didn't win the lottery, you didn't get some new bonus. And I think that's a big risk people take is they see financing and they all of a sudden start living beyond their means or start using the money for things that aren't business related because they feel that they have a large cash infusion. And I think that's where sometimes people, there are risks are if you're going to take on financing to grow your business, use it to grow your business. If you want to take on financing for your business to go on vacation, you should probably think twice before you do that.
And what's the most important KPI I should track for cash flow?
That's a great question. I don't know that it's any one KPI. I think when we want to track cash flow, we want to track, are people paying me? So if we have access to a daily cash flow solution, we want to be tracking that the cash flow is, we want to make sure that our cash flow is more than our expenses. I would say that's going to be one of the biggest KPIs is, understanding our burn rate in a lot of ways. I think that gets used a lot with startups because a lot of times startups don't have revenue. So they're always focused on burn rate because they're getting money through investments. But I love using burn rates as well, because if we have an understanding of our cash flow that's coming in, and we understand how much we burn cash on a daily basis, then we can understand what the gap is in between what we're normally spending and what we're bringing in. And that spread it can either be our profit or it can then be used to grow our business with other opportunities. So, depending on how we want to, a lot of companies think that EBITDA is one of the most important metrics of their business, and EBITDA is definitely important. But EBITDA is not necessarily a cash flow KPI. EBITDA is more of like an overall financial health and the growth of your business. Whereas cash flow, we want to get down to the nit and gritty of what am I bringing in versus what's going out, fixed costs. So we know what our fixed costs, this is what's going out every day. Or if we're only paying, let's say, our electric bill once a month, what does that look like pro rata on a daily basis? If I'm paying, $300 a month for electric, then I want to look at it as I'm paying $10 every day for electric. And understanding what our fixed costs are, pro rata on maybe a daily basis, then understanding what our daily cash flow is, and then seeing, are we underwater? Are we doing well? And what the spread is. And then we want to see that spread and watch that gap between what I'm spending and what I'm making. We want to see that gap increase over time.
All right, we have time for one more question. Is there a benchmark of how much cash flow I should have on hand for my business?
That's another great question. So I think it really depends on the specific business. When we're talking about a benchmark, it's really tough to say without knowing the exact type of business. What are they in wholesale? Are they in reselling? What do their margins look like? I would say, ideally, you don't want your bank account to go negative, and you don't want to have non-sufficient funds because that's scary. You want to have, I would say, you kind of want to have enough cash on hand to at least, at the very minimum, pay a month's worth of bills. Now, it's not always possible, especially for companies starting up. Sometimes you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're scrapping it together. But for most companies, I think, I look at it kind of like the way people, I always kind of compare it to baseball, and that you always want to get to 500, and then you want to get to 5 games above 500, and then 5 games above that. We want to get to the point where we have at least 1 month of capital on hand, that if for some reason the business had to shut down for a month, the whole company doesn't close. And then we want to grow to having 2 months on hand, then 3 months on hand. And then we want to see if we can double it and get to 6 months on hand. And that's how we keep kind of building the business. So again, it's really tough without knowing all the different margins, whether, and the price constraint, the cost constraints of a business. But I always kind of focus, can we get ourselves to having enough capital on hand that if for some reason all our suppliers disappeared and all our customers disappeared, we could still run the business for a month. And then I want to keep growing that month by month.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex. We really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you guys. And thank you for having me.
And thank you to everyone listening in. Feel free to reach out if you're interested in learning more about Feedvisor or Payability. And with that, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.